All right, good morning, YouTube. I just wanted to make my second video speaking about how PDE5 inhibitors can be used in a pre-workout context. And so, before we begin, I'd just like to tell you guys what I'm having pre-workout. I got some Echo Vision Drama and coconut flavored LaCroix. It's gonna be really good together. Gonna have a good lift. I thought it'd be fitting to explain this concept of how PDE5 inhibitors work pre-workout right before I go hit a workout. So, to start, PDE5 inhibitors are basically class of drugs that are typically used to treat ED, erectile dysfunction. But however, they have activity at other parts of the body. I think there's actually a drug called Revatio, basically the same thing as Sildenafil, which is an active drug used in Viagra to treat pulmonary hypertension. In fact, PDE5 inhibitors, the first drug, Viagra, was actually first pioneered to treat hypertension. But however, subjects were found to have erections, just erections from out of nowhere. So then they ended up rebranding the drug to be used for erectile dysfunction. Now it's sold very popularly around the world. The important thing I want to say, though, is that that I want you guys to bear in mind is that with these PDE5 inhibitors, is that they're not tissue selective. Like, they don't have an alpha, beta, gamma, delta subtype. Like, they're not tissue selective. They apply to all smooth muscle. So it's not just your corpus cavernosum. It's the arteries in your arms. It's arteries, that go to your brain or even in your eyes, which is why a side effect is, dizziness or discoloration of your eyes, of your vision. And so, this is why I think these drugs can have potential usage in a pre-workout context. And also for androgen receptor upregulation, which I'm going to get into the second part of this video. Before we begin, I just want to list some of the drugs. Is Sildenafil, Tadalafil, Vardenafil. I typically would rather use Sildenafil over Tadalafil because Tadalafil has the longest half-life out of those three drugs. And if we're going to be using this drug for pre-workout context and we don't have erectile dysfunction, we're not going to be in the gym for more than a day. And what seems to be the trend with Tadalafil is that it has a very long half-life and can last up to 1 day. If by chance you accidentally get an erection, you may end up getting priapism, which is something you want to try to avoid. However, if you get priapism with Sildenafil, it's only going to last for about 4 hours because the Cmax is 2 hours. It starts to fade at around 4. And so it's not going to be too bad. You're not getting any serious health complications. Main difference between Vardenafil and Sildenafil is that Vardenafil is far much more potent in that it needs a very little. There's very little required for it to actually end up working within your body. However, it is newer and a bit more expensive. So just for cost sake, it'd be best to go with Sildenafil. And so that's basically those drugs. But in order for me to explain how these drugs work, I need to explain the typical mechanism of action, how vasodilation works. Cheers, my friends. Succulent. I need to explain the mechanism of action of how these things work. So, typically in our body, how we vasodilate is we get this gaseous substance called nitrous oxide that gets synthesized in our body and released into our endothelium. Nitrous oxide is created from a reaction between arginine, NADPH, and oxygen that we breathe. And so in arginine, there's a very special, there's an element known as nitrogen in it. And what happens in a reaction is through the nitric oxide synthase pathway, we are going to takes the nitrogen off the arginine and using NADPH to facilitate a reaction. And the oxygen that we have, we are going to transfix an oxygen molecule to a nitrogen to produce citrulline, which is the same thing as arginine, but with I think it's a hydroxide instead of a nitrogen, NADP plus, and NO, which is the thing we're looking for. And now, so this NO is very volatile, so it only lasts for so long. But once it's been created, it gets released into the endothelium. into the artery. And what it does there is it's going to signal a primary messenger molecule known as guanylyl cyclase. This guanylyl cyclase is going to take GTP and turn it into cyclic GMP by dephosphorylating it. This cyclic GMP will then go and activate protein kinase G. This protein kinase G will then go and block any passage of any calcium ions from the sarcoplasmic reticulum into the smooth muscle sarcomere, and it's going to prevent any calcium from entering, which is going to prevent activation of calmodulin, which will then prevent activation of MLCK, myosin-like chain kinase, which will then prevent that from binding to troponin and will prevent any actin-myosin cross bridges to form, ultimately, which will prevent smooth muscle contraction. And now, this is typically what happens in vasodilation. However, our body has a natural process of preventing excessive vasodilation so we don't die from hypotension. We have an enzyme known as phosphodiesterase. This phosphodiesterase enzyme is going to go back to the step where cyclic GMP activates protein kinase G. It's going to basically denature cyclic GMP and turn it back into GTP to once again allow calcium to enter into the cell and to have its signaling cascade. The role that phosphodiesterase type 5 inhibitors have is they basically prevent this phosphodiesterase enzyme from acting upon cyclic GMP, thus permanently or for a short period of time preventing any calcium entry into the cells. So now that I've explained, the typical how nitrous oxide works in our body and the role phosphodiesterase has in preventing vasodilation, how phosphodiesterase enzymes allow for this vasodilation by preventing the activity of phosphodiesterase, I'd like to get into the protocol of how these kinds of drugs work, of how I would take this. Now, since I'd be taking this in a pre-workout context, I'd want to be sure to hydrate very well and also have a very high intake of salt and other minerals and electrolytes so that I can make sure that I'm actually having a slight bit of hypertension and that I have enough water to fuel myself for this workout, and so that my blood, there's still a lot of blood to fill up my arteries, and that I'm not dehydrated. Another thing I may want to take, and it's kind of counterintuitive, it's a contraindication actually told by doctors for you not to take, is nitrates. One thing I told you that I had this morning was some beetroot juice. Take another sip. You know what beetroot juice reminds me of? It reminds me of cornfields. And for that reason, it reminds me of cornfields because cornfields are often sprayed with synthetic nitrates, and they give you that, that if you've ever been around one, you know what I'm talking about. And it's that same thing that's in beets, that high levels of nitrogen that's going to allow me to produce that nitric oxide. The reason why I'd be taking it with a Viagra or Sildenafil tablet is because I would actually take half the recommended dose. So typically doctors would prescribe a 30 milligram dose to healthy young males. I would half that dose, maybe take 15 milligrams, and take it with a little bit of beetroot. Because both these drugs act on the nitric oxide pathway, I'd want to use them synergistically with each other. Same thing as I spoke about in my other video with amphetamine and L-tyrosine. They work synergistically. So I'd want to use these two drugs together to get a synergistic pathway and also to make my drug and prescription last longer if you are going to be prescribed. I would take about 30 minutes before your pre-workout so it can start to have its effectiveness in your body. And this kind of sounds like a no-brainer. I would avoid any erotic thoughts. Don't watch porn. Probably don't text any girls or don't think about anything erotic, as you really don't want to get an erection in public. And now the second part of my video, which I really wanted to speak about, it's really exciting to me, is I was actually originally planning on making this video to speak about carnitine supplementation and how it can upregulate androgen receptor sensitivity and how it can be used in a fat loss context because it's used to carry fatty acids into the mitochondria. However, a lot of the research I found was pretty iffy or ambivalent, and I really couldn't find any consequential or big meta-analyses stating that carnitine does increase androgen receptors, does upregulate androgen receptors. In a study by Kramer et al., it states that there may be a slight increase in upregulation. However, in another study by AUSA, they says that there is no increase in upregulation via carnitine supplementation. However, what I did find in my research was that PDE5 inhibitors, specifically tadalafil and sildenafil, which is found in Cialis and Viagra, respectively, were found in a study by Aversa et al. Was found to assist in steroidogenesis at the testes, perhaps by increasing not luteinizing hormone, but to some unknown vector. And another study, chronic treatment with sildenafil stimulates Leydig cell production. And in a study, in another study by I don't actually by Saravia in a mice study where they were given 25 milligrams per kilogram of weight of sildenafil for 4 weeks, they actually had an increase of testosterone by 100 to 200 milligram. Yeah, what was it? I forgot the unit, but decagram per deciliter, milligrams per deciliter. Per blood. So that's a pretty substantial increase. While I do know it's only found in mice, it could most certainly be applied to humans, and I do believe that this does have great promise in increasing, the androgen receptor upregulation. It could even increase our, not even our androgen receptor upregulation, but the production of androgens within our body. So I do think sildenafil has much potential. Outside of that, it's already being used to treat hypertension, specifically pulmonary hypertension, as I mentioned earlier with Ravadio, but it's also being used to treat dementia. I actually remember reading a small journal in the JAMA that sildenafil can be used to treat Alzheimer's. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing the promise that this drug has in multiple different contexts to help treat many ailments. And I really think there's just so much potential for this drug. Anyways, guys, I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought. Tell me if I missed anything. Tell me if you'd like to see me cover anything else. And yeah, please do have a good rest of your day. And I'll see you guys around. Goodbye.